I've been in and out of office for at least 25 years. You know how it goes when you run a nonprofit, but it's the best nonprofit anyone could ever find. We educate families with mental illness. We have classes for those with mental illness. We have support groups. We have speaker meetings. We have campaigns to fight stigma and raise awareness that mental illnesses are treatable illnesses and recovery happens. You know, for some reason tonight, I'm just reminded of the serenity prayer. And it goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And we cannot change that a relative of ours has schizophrenia or a mental illness. We have to deal with this unwanted visitor. But we can change how we cope with this unwanted visitor of mental illness. And we can create a different environment which may be more healing for that person struggling with a brain illness than had we not taken some training through NAMI or learning some coping skills. So there are things we can change, but we do have to accept that when mental illness visits a family, we cannot change this. We didn't cause it. We can cure it. All we can really do is learn to cope with it. And that's why NAMI Westside LA brought our incredible speaker tonight. Her name is Miriam Feldman. Miriam Feldman, this is the book she wrote, which is an excellent book called He Came In With It. He Came In With It, A Portrait of Motherhood and Madness by Miriam Feldman. I think Miriam is an excellent writer. I think she may also be a little bit entertaining too. I just want to say she also wrote a wonderful blog, which we put on our website, a blog about Locked and Loaded, from having a son with schizophrenia, prepared me for the global pandemic. So we'd like to hear about that too, Miriam. So I want to just introduce you to Erin Ryan, our executive director. I want to introduce you to Sharon Cohen, a board member of ours. Janis Black-Warner there, we're named the speaker after her because she's an ambassador for NAMI Westside LA. So I want you to know who these people are, and I'm sure more people will be coming on. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Miriam. If you have any questions before you begin, please feel free to ask us. So I give you talented, creative Miriam Feldman.
Hi there. So my name is Miriam Feldman, but I go by Mimi, and I refer to myself as Mimi, so don't be confused. So this is my book. It's, like Sharon said, it's called He Came In With It, and it's kind of the chronicle of the first 10 years that my son had mental illness and the diagnosis and all of that. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just reading a little bit from the book, and then I'll talk to you.
Okay, we have a lot of more guests here listening to you, Miriam.
Great. This is the first chapter. It's called Son. I guess there were signs. There had to have been signs. I missed them all. So where does this story begin? Damned if I know exactly. I had me a son. I had a fat little baby boy with a mouth like a rubber band. My husband Craig and I surfed the labor waves together like champs. When my son came out of me, the room was oddly hushed. He was my first, so I didn't know what to expect. But it sure was quiet in there. No slap and cry, no nothing. Nick was blue and cold when he was born. We waited in the delivery room for his inaugural wail and heard only silence. Don't worry, dear, the nurse said. We just have to warm him up a bit. They placed him in an apparatus that looked like a toaster oven. Everything in the room seemed cold, frozen. My husband and I each held our breath, and finally our son took his first. And we let ours out. I had my boy. Deep, dark eyes and a serious composure. All the fingers, all the toes. We named him Samuel as we had planned, and then after a day or two, Craig and I renamed him Nicholas. Nick. I'd had a beloved uncle with that name, so it was fine with me. Craig gave him the middle name Dylan after Bob. Nick, a normal, healthy boy. He was strong, he was adorable, and his future was as bright as the goddamn sun. I would loll around and stare at that future of his like a baby myself, entranced with jangling keys. Now Nick sits in a dark room all day, each day, and I wonder, what is he thinking? Who is in there? I see how people look at him. I can read my family's faces. I know that what has happened to him is a tragedy. But to me, he is in there, and his future is still ablaze, alone in his filthy apartment that I try to keep clean. So that's the lead into the book. So I was new to all this when it happened, like most people probably are. I spent the first 15 years of my mother career obsessed with car accidents, cancer, and child abductions, none of which happened. And then out of left field came schizophrenia. And I was ill prepared. I didn't understand what was happening, and it took me a long time to catch up. You know, I'm sure as everybody knows, serious mental illness is like a gale force hurricane that just blows through your life, leaving anything not nailed down gone. And you stand there looking at this new terrain and try and figure out what happened. And as a mother, my first instinct was, okay, how can I fix this? First of all, it has to be my fault. I grew him in my body. It has to be something I either did while I was pregnant or didn't do, or something I did with him in the first 15 years of his life, but I was sure it was my fault, and I was darn sure it was my job to fix it. And the problem is, if you were to make a list of the red flags for serious mental illness and the list of normal teenage behavior, you're going to have virtually the same list. So how was I supposed to know this was mental illness? He acted like all the other kids, impulsive, confrontational, flighty. And I just went along for a year or two thinking, okay, well, this is what teenagers are like. And then his friends seemed to be growing out of it and getting their act together. And Nick, it just got worse and worse. And finally, there was a suicide attempt. And that was the point at which I knew something serious was going on. But even then, we went another good year treating it as though it were substance abuse issues, because he was, like so many, self-medicating. Now I look back at it and I can see the signs. I can see points where I understood, well, I didn't understand, but he was telling me that he was hearing voices. There was a time when he had broken up with a girlfriend, and I walked by his room one night, and he was lying on his bed with his face to the wall, and I went in and sat down next to him, and he told me how heartbroken he was, and I told him not to worry, you know, this, in the scope of his whole life, this would be just a blip on the radar, and did my, you know, typical mom talk. And at one point he turned and he said to me, I just have these terrible thoughts, Mom. And I launched into, you know, Mom Talk 12B, telling him, oh, well, Nick, we all have crazy thoughts. We all have scary ideas and thoughts. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what you do. You can't feel bad about your thoughts. And he belabored the point a bit. And I realized now, I think he was telling me he was hearing voices. And I dismissed it and told him, oh, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter what you think, because how would I know? How would I know to identify that at that point? And we took him to drug rehab. We took him to therapy. It was at first, after they dismissed or accepted that it wasn't simply drug abuse, he went through all the diagnoses. You know, it started with, first they said anxiety, then they said depression, then eventually when he was about 17 or 18, they said bipolar. And then finally, when he was 20, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And the best thing that ever happened to me was when we got the schizophrenia diagnosis, somebody told me about NAMI. And I somehow managed to enroll and get into the family to family program up in Hollywood. And I think it saved Nick's life. I think it probably saved my life. To go from a point of zero information and zero understanding of what was going on to have this 12-week course where they sat me down and we went through, the medications, the different mental illnesses, the legal system, the law enforcement system, the hospitals, all the things that we teach in that NAMI program. I went back to my life after 12 weeks of that, at least armed with some tools and some knowledge and some understanding. So I was able to move really quickly past things that a lot of people get stuck on, like stigma, once you've had the police in front of your house, handcuffing and taking your son away with helicopters overhead in your nice middle-class neighborhood and all the neighbors on their porches looking, you get over stigma really quick. I like to say that the one good side effect to having a son with schizophrenia is I'm officially embarrassment proof. There's nothing that can happen that will embarrass me. And once you dispense with those unimportant things, once you get your priorities in order, you're much better able to deal with things. So I don't think about stigma. I let that go pretty early on, and the rest of my kids are very open about it. And I think that by our existence and by our interacting with the world, we've been able to educate a lot of people. My middle daughter, Lucy, is a real warrior. And, even out in the world, she hears a stranger make a comment that is not okay with her about mental illness or about anything like that, she'll take them on right on the street. And I think things like that have a real trickle down effect, and they really can change the world in profound ways. Even just recently, I was with Nick, who's 34 now, here in Washington, and we pulled into 7-Eleven, and he opened his car door and it banged into the car next to him. And up here in Washington, we have a lot of real sort of rough and ready kind of guys. And this guy jumped out of his big monster truck ready to just get into a fight with Nick and started yelling at him about banging the door. And, Nick doesn't respond to confrontation. He just doesn't respond. And so he just stood there, and this guy was yelling at him. And I thought, I jumped out of the car and I went over and I said, Nick, go in the store. And I said to the guy, really a soft voice, and I said, I want to explain something to you. My son has schizophrenia. He's not really connected to the world that we're in the same way. I'm sorry he banged your door, and if there's something, if he's damaged it, I'll take care of it. Please do not yell at him, because this is something that is not something that is in his control or that he can handle. And this guy did such a 180. And by the end of it was so compassionate and so open. And I said to him, just next time somebody acts weird or doesn't respond in the appropriate way or what you feel is appropriate, just give a minute to thinking maybe something's going on there before you jump down that person's throat. And he looked me in the eye and he said, I will. And when that happens, I think that's better than, multi-million-dollar ad campaigns and things like that. When you just get a person on the street in the moment and look him in the eye, maybe that'll be something he'll carry with him the rest of his life. And so that's one of the good things. It's one of the good effects, I think, just in the way that we as a family interact and move through the world with Nick, unafraid, unashamed. This is our son, brother, and we love him, and this is who he is, and he has a place in this world like everybody else. And that's something that I feel very strongly about, and I talk about a lot when I'm giving talks, is not so much to NAMI people because I'm sort of preaching to the choir, but when I give a talk about the book, and I'm in a bookstore, I'm in, a different environment, I say to people, look, the thing is, 1% of the people, the population, gets schizophrenia. And that's just schizophrenia. It's a huge number of people. It's not a rarity. And all these people have a right to a place in our world. We're not here to do them a favor and carve out a little corner for them, or shun them off to the prisons and the streets as the place where they get their treatment. We don't have that right. We're not doing them a favor. They have a right to a place in our culture. They have a right to a place in our society. And it's our job as a civilized society, as cultured, intelligent people, to make sure that that happens. And it's a big change that needs to occur, as we all know. And when I frame it that way, it's interesting because I see people shift a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I mean, we're not doing them a favor. This is their world too. How dare we take 1% or really 4% of the population and say, you don't get to be in our culture. You don't get to be in our society. You don't have a place. It's immoral to do that. So that's one of the things I talk about a lot. Now, after, what I talk about in the book also is my journey, as a mother, as a member of society, as an advocate, as now an agitator and activist. And I, in the beginning, I was afraid, and I was not ashamed, but I just didn't know what to do with the information. And I really thought, like I said, just give me a little time and I'll be able to fix this. And so I just thought, just keep it quiet, keep it in the family. I'm going to somehow fix this. And I'm a person who's pathologically functional. No matter what happens, I get up, I take my shower, I put on my boots, and I go into, the world, and I do what needs to be done. So for many years in the beginning, I pretended like everything was fine. And not because I was afraid of mental illness or ashamed of mental illness, but because I had a misguided idea. And I had also 3 daughters, and 2 of them were young. And I just thought, I just got to put a good face on it so they'll feel normal, which was a huge mistake, because what I succeeded in doing was sending all kinds of crazy mixed messages, because they knew what was going on. And there was mom pretending everything was fine when the house was on fire. And that just made them feel crazy also. And so I talk a lot, and I appeal to mothers, parents, people involved with this to just, let's be real about it, because trying to hide it and put a good face on it just really kind of makes it worse. So I went along for a long time doing that and eating myself up alive inside of, did I cause this? I took melatonin to sleep when I was pregnant with him, or, I had 1 beer before I knew I was pregnant. And then you read about the refrigerator mother and all the psychology where it pointed the finger at the mother for so long. And it made for a very unhealthy environment in our home. It made the other kids feel insecure and unsure. And eventually, what I used to do, this was my trick, and this was the turning point for me. My trick was I would hold it together in the daytime, and I would do everything and put a nice dinner on the table, and, everything was fine. Meanwhile, I'm gritting my teeth to the point where my dentist got me a night guard. And then when the girls settled down to do their homework or into their rooms at night, I'd go into the bathroom and I'd run the shower and I'd lie down on the cool tile floor and I'd cry. And I thought, well, nobody could hear me. And I also drank a unhealthy amount of red wine for a few years there. And I would lie on the floor and I would cry, and then I would pull myself together. And one night I walked out of the bathroom and there was Rose, my youngest daughter. And there I was, obviously having been crying. So I couldn't pretend nothing was going on. And she said to me, Mom, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I was busted. And I said, Rose, I'm crying because I miss your brother. And she said, what do you mean you miss Nick? Nick's not gone. Nick's still here. And I said, yeah, he is, but he's not who he was supposed to be. And my 9-year-old looked me in the eye and said, yeah, he is. It's just not what you thought. And she walked into her room and I popped down into the window seat, and it was like boom. This was a moment. And I sat there and I just let that sink in. And over the next few weeks, a change sort of fomented in me. And I mean, talk about from the mouths of babes. I still go back to that sometimes when I'm howling at the moon because this horrible thing happened to my son. And I remind myself, this is my son. This is the person I grew in my belly and gave birth to and brought into this world. And just because I had, like we all do, this wonderful idea of how his life was going to go, that doesn't mean that was how his life was supposed to go. This is how he came to us, and this is who he is. And I damn well better get my act together and learn how to be a mother to this Nick, not the Nick that I thought was going to be. And I need to constantly check myself and remind myself to let go of that. And it's hard, 34 years in, it's still hard to let go of. But this is who he is, and this is the title of the book. He came in with it. I didn't get that title till 3 years into writing the book. And I go into these periodic frenzies where I start calling every doctor within 100-mile radius because I'm sure there's an answer out there that I've missed. And in this particular frenzy, I called a friend of mine who does these very intricate astrological charts, which is something I don't even particularly believe in. But I said, okay, Shannon, do the chart. Maybe the answer's there. And she took all this information and she called me back the next day. And I answered the phone and she said, Mimi, he came in with it. Every single marker, every single indication in the stars shows that this was his life path. This is what he came with. You may not have seen it until 15 or 16 years later, but he came in with it. And I was writing down all the stuff she said, and I kept doodling, he came in with it, he came in with it. And then I'd forgotten all about it. And then many years later, it was like, yeah, this is the title. And for me as a mother, that wake-up call for my daughter and making my peace with the fact that this is my son. This is who he is. He wasn't supposed to be anything else. And there are times when I think maybe it was lucky. Maybe it was lucky. A certain amount of people have to get this awful disease. Maybe it was lucky the universe or God or whatever you believe in picked him because he's got me. And I'll never give up. And I haven't given up, and I fight tooth and nail. And in another family, in another life situation, who knows what his life could have turned out to be. And his life is progressively improving, with pit bulls and, and hospitalizations and everything else. He's still moving towards a better life. And I don't think he would have had that if he didn't have the family he had. So maybe that was meant to be also. And, schizophrenia is a disease that it presents itself in awful ways, in ugly ways, with violence, with things that are not very palatable and are frightening. And to have to rearrange your thinking and learn to approach somebody who can be frightening with love, because it's the person that you love, that's an education. And now, 34 years into his life, I look at my son and I think, schizophrenia is arguably one of the worst mental illnesses. And it has all this ugliness. And my son is a human being of such intrinsic goodness that even schizophrenia couldn't touch him. He may not be the famous artist he was supposed to be, and he may not have the life that we all dreamed he was going to have, but every minute of every day, he is a good human being, and he is filled with goodness, and none of the ugliness of schizophrenia. I mean, we've had our times of punching holes in the wall and frustration and anger, but he wouldn't hurt a fly. And I feel like it's his immense goodness that is the buffer against those things that schizophrenia brings. And I'm proud of him about that. A lot of times when I do interviews and talks, people ask me, you know, do you feel like this was brave, or this is so brave, or you're the super mother? And, you know, I say, I think as a mother, you bring, or a parent, you're bringing people into the world, or you adopt children and you bring them into this life. The least you can do is do a good job. You know what I mean? That's like the baseline. And I don't think that it's hard, and we all deal with it, and it's not easy, but I don't think that we deserve any awards. I think it's our job. And, you know, I used to look at moms when I had my 4 beautiful, perfect little kids, and I'd walk down the street and you'd see a mother with one of those elaborate wheelchairs who had a child who had, you know, Parkinson's or cerebral palsy or one of these things, and was obviously gravely disabled. And I used to look at those moms and I would think, I couldn't do it. You know, how could I do it? I wouldn't be able to. And now I realize, of course I would. You know, it's your kid and you do it. You rise to the occasion. And now I see how everybody can do that. And so I'm not particularly proud of anything, except I'm proud of him. And I'm proud of the fact that he keeps going and he works hard to keep moving forward in his life. So once we got Nick stable, and, you know, with some other setbacks, and, you know, we still happened, he had a big hospitalization a couple of years ago. But once I accepted who he was, and I started advocating for him in a real way. And then I got involved with NAMI, and then I started thinking about writing a book. And I decided that I wanted to write a book that would be a legacy of and for Nick, so that there would be something in the world that represented who he is for real and who he was, which is part of who he is now. And so that what's gone would be documented in there, and also an understanding of this journey. When this first happened, I used to sit in my house and look out the window of my nice Hancock Park neighborhood, and I felt like everybody else in the world had this clean, beautiful life, and clean was the word that kept coming to mind. Everybody else in the world had this clean, beautiful life, and I had this dirtiness, you know, this dirty thing that I was trying to clean up and fix before I could re-enter the world. And if I had come across a book like mine, you know, my book is not, it's, God knows it's not a how-to, maybe a how not to, but when I sat down to write this book, I decided I had to be brutally honest. I had to be honest about myself, my mistakes, my shortcomings, my marriage, my parenting, all of that. Because I wanted to put something out there that shows another mother, it's okay. It's okay that you're scrambling and stumbling and screwing up and trying to hold it together with spit and glue. There's no other way. How else would you be able to do something like this? And if I had been able to read this book, I would have saved a lot of time feeling isolated and alone and not understood. And since I've written this book, every day I get letters from all over the country from strangers saying, oh my God, this is the first time I've read something that feels like it's me talking, that I'm understood, and it's given me this strength and this understanding. And I got a letter the other day that was like, that's it. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. Because she said that, and she said that it's given her a new understanding and a new pride of her in herself. And then she said, and the thing that I really don't understand is how you can tell all these tragic and awful escapades and be so funny and have it, you know, have so much humor and so much laughter. And that's kind of a thing in my family, is we have gallows humor, and it's in the book. And that's how we've gotten through things. She said she sits and reads the book and she's laughing out loud, and her husband keeps looking at her and saying, aren't you reading a book about schizophrenia? And she said she can't explain to him why and how it's so funny. And she tries, and then the next minute she's crying because it's that kind of a thing. And I thought, okay, that's what I set out to do, because I don't have any answers. As you all know, there aren't any, hard and fast answers, but it's sort of, it's our story. It's our family story. I talk a lot about the ancillary stuff that happened, the fallout to the family, the siblings especially, which is something I feel very strongly about. It's impossible to take care of and attend to a son with fomenting schizophrenia and be a good mom to 3 other kids. I mean, it's just, you can't do that. And so I talk a lot about how I regret my, faking it, for, let's call it what it is, all the faking that I did. It was a waste of time. It took a lot of energy. All the kids knew what was going on anyway, and it just confused them. So that was a mistake I made. But I also talk about, just a couple of years ago, I thought about it. I know what I should have done. I should have assigned each daughter a surrogate mom, because I'm lucky to have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to friends. And in Hancock Park, or Larchmont Village, it really was like a village. We had a group of, a couple dozen tight-knit families. And there were a lot of mothers that I was told often they would rather was their mother than me. So I should have appointed one to each daughter so that they had somebody that was theirs to turn to and talk to when I was lying on the bathroom floor drinking red wine. And I think that that's something that I'd like to talk to other parents, because I think that you're in such a fight or flight mode, you're in crisis mode all the time. And it's just, you just want to keep everybody alive and safe. How am I going to usher a 9-year-old and a 13-year-old into teenagerhood and young womanhood? That's something that I think about a lot. And I think that we as moms tend to want to handle it all ourselves. So I think that one of my big messages is delegating responsibility and letting people help you and really attending to the other kids. Because I see my daughters now, and I mean, they're glorious. They're just wonderful women. But they're all still dealing with PTSD, from police helicopters and holes in walls and violence and screaming and frightening things. And the fallout to, because my husband and I were at each other's throats for years because, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to handle it. So they're dealing with the fallout from that. And also my youngest daughter, she doesn't have as much of a problem with loss, because the Nick we have now is kind of the Nick that she's always known. But for my middle daughter, who was 13 or 14 when this all started, he was her North Star. He was her guide into the world of music and art and culture. And I mean, the sun rose over his head. And the loss was so crushing. And it really, she's 31 now, and she actually just started going to therapy a year or two ago. And she told me, she said, Mom, I never even started to process any of this. I had no idea. And so I think we have to provide for and attend to all the members of the family. And I think we have to allow ourselves to just be a total wreck sometimes. So that's what the book is for me. And it talks a lot about the mental health system and the problems and, all of that I don't need to tell any of you guys about, but it's something that I do think that other people need to read. So that's what it is. I've woven in my own story. I've given you what I hope is a beautiful portrait of a beautiful human being, Nick, and maybe some tools and maybe some ability to look at it and not be so scared about it and just be more open about it. Because I think that that's what we all need. It's just that permission to have the conversation, and to have the conversation not just with each other, but with other people too. I'm doing virtual book clubs, and everybody here, this is the thing that's the nice byproduct of COVID. I didn't get to do my book tour. I was going to go all over the country. It's so disappointing, but I learned how to do Zoom, and I realized that now everybody's doing the book clubs this way. So I'm doing, anyone who wants to read the book for their book club, give them my email, call me up. I will come to their book club. I do like 20 a week. I'm doing all these book clubs, and it's great. But I did a book club last night, and at the book club, it was astounding. There were maybe 12 women. 4 out of the 12 women had immediate family, brothers, fathers, I think maybe a sister, immediate family with schizophrenia, not just mental illness, schizophrenia. And they had never told each other. And they were like, what? What are you saying? I haven't heard. And it was like somehow having me tell my story gave them permission to talk about it and opened up this. And I mean, that's like a third of the people had schizophrenia in their immediate family and had never talked about it. And we need to talk about it, because how in the world can we expect to give them, not carve out and do them a favor, but give these people their rightful place in our society if we can't even talk about our immediate family to people about it? Right. And I do it all the time. And I'm going to stop now and see if there's any questions or something. But one of the best things is Rose, my youngest, my 9-year-old, she used to do this imitation of me back in the day when I would spend hours and hours on the phone networking, trying to figure this out, and she would go, look, this is mom. Hello, my name is Miriam Feldman and I have a son with schizophrenia. And that was the family's imitation of me, because I would just lead with it, with everybody. And even to this day, I wrote an article called Dying to Talk About It, which talks about how when I lead with that, when I just am open and clear about it, everybody wants to talk about it. Recently I was on the phone to the bank because Nick's SSI check hadn't cleared because of COVID and the rent check had bounced. So I called the bank, and I could have said my son's disabled and it's an SSI check, but I just, by habit, I say, my son has schizophrenia and da-da-da-da. We go through the whole thing, and then right at the end, at the space where she's supposed to go, is there anything else I can help you with? She said, can I tell you something personal? And proceeded to tell me her father had schizophrenia, and we talked for 20 minutes. And that call may or may not have been recorded for educational purposes, but we talked about it. She was dying to talk about it. It happened to me with a gas station attendant once. And people need to talk about it. And so if you give them permission, and then it opens up space for it, and then it becomes something that's part of our world. Because these people with serious mental illness, but no mental illnesses, we need to embrace them, And I know that there's people who have to be, in, prison who have schizophrenia, but there are people who need to be in hospitals. I know that. But there's a lot of people who can be comfortably in the world with us. And I think it also helps the family when it's just something that, okay, this is what it is, and this is my son, and this is what he has. So that's what I try and do. So I'll stop talking now, and I'm wondering, I don't know, how do you do it, Sharon, with questions that people do?
Miriam, we want to thank you. That was a very heartfelt, vulnerable conversation about a mom's travail and success and heartache about the relationship with you and your son who has schizophrenia and your 3 daughters. It was very heartfelt and very meaningful to all of us, profoundly meaningful. And we all want to talk about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to open it up to questions. And as I see people raise their hand, I will try to call on them. Whoever has a question, and we'll just have a question answer. Is this okay, Erin? Any more comments about this? I guess that's okay.
That's fine. And you can also put questions in the chat too, if you'd like, but yeah, feel free to raise your hand and Sharon can kind of facilitate.
Yes. So anybody have a question for Miriam, the author of, he came in with this. Yes, Kelly and Thalia. Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the point of just being able to talk about it. He has 3 sisters, and one of our daughters has told us all the time that your generation, you hide this stuff, and if you had cancer, you talk about it, but you don't talk about it. And we totally agree that we just need to open up. But then there's a side of me, and I come from a very large family, and so does my wife. And I kind of feel like I'm talking behind his back.
That's a tricky thing. And I think that you can be judicious about what information you're sharing. But I think to like you said, I mean, if he had cancer, if he had a different disease, you wouldn't hide that. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, this is what it is, guys. It's schizophrenia. There's some things that maybe I'm going to protect his privacy about, but this is what's going on. Deal with it. And if they can't deal with it, the hell with them. You know, I mean, I've really separated the wheat from the chaff here. And, you know, my thing has been, this is my son, and he's going to be sitting next to me at Thanksgiving, and that's how it is. And the acceptance comes along after that.
Yeah. One thing is that our son, we think, because he has not been to a doctor, has not been diagnosed, has anosognosia.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't believe he's sick. So that feels even harder to be able to say anything to anyone because we don't really know.
But you know what? That's one of the most important things to say to other people. Now, maybe if he's anosognosia or he's violent or he's, you know, disruptive, you're not going to bring him to Thanksgiving dinner. Nick's manifestation is he would generally just sit there and not say a word. So it wasn't disruptive. Of course, you have to be respectful of people. But I think the anosognosia is a really important thing to educate people about because they don't get it. And the thing is, I said to my family, because now Nick, after 15 years, he has insight. He didn't for a long time. And I explained to them that the very organ that would allow him to understand that he's sick is the organ that's afflicted. So how is he supposed to understand? So we have to make a lot of room for that situation and have a lot of understanding for it. And I mean, that's the key to really getting treatment. And, you know, there's that tricky thing of the pacing of like trying to get them to be more aware so that they'll take their medication, so that they'll have more insight, so that they'll take their medication. And, you know, it's this circular thing and it's so tricky to navigate. But I think we need to explain that to people. People need to understand that because they don't get it. And they think that something like schizophrenia has to do with, you know, like lack of ambition, or they're lazy, or they're this, or they're that. And it's like, they gotta understand what it means to not know that they're sick. And you know, I recently was talking to the woman who is the head of SARTA, the Schizophrenia and Related Disorders Association of America. And I was doing a talk and I was kind of picking her brain of how to get people to understand this. And she says, frame it this way. It's not dissimilar than Alzheimer's, than dementia. Now, when your parents have dementia, you go to the doctor talks to you. He doesn't shut you out and say it's not your business because your parent's an adult. They include you in it, and people understand that people with dementia don't know that they're sick. So we have to provide for and accommodate that and treat them in a different way than throwing medication at them and sending them home. You need to, and so people, if you make that analogy to dementia, people understand better. And my thing is, we've got to get the understanding out there in the general population. You know, the other thing too with dementia is when there's dementia, they have a silver alert and the nice policeman comes and brings your mom in who's walking out in the snow barefoot and helps her home. Great. You call the nice policeman when your schizophrenic 34-year-old son is out in the street screaming and he could end up dead, or he's probably going to end up in jail. This is not right. And that's a way to analogize it, I think, that helps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Dementia in our family, so that was a good example.
Any other questions from anybody? Any other thoughts you want to share? Janis.
Thank you, Miriam. I'd say my son is 26, diagnosed paranoid schizophrenia at 19. It's been a journey. But what's interesting when you talk about it, and I'm like you, I don't have any stigma, 99, almost 100% of people could be the supermarket checkout person and they understand. But why does about 95% of people say, I'm so sorry? Mm-hmm. That makes, it's like putting a knife through my heart. Like, I'm so sorry. So how do you react to those people?
You know, because they're trying, you know, and they're being compassionate, and you know, having sympathy is warranted. It's a pretty horrible disease. But I think the thing to do, like if somebody, something like, I would, you know, and I've had that too, is I would say, thank you. You know, I appreciate your sympathy, but you know what? He's terrific, and this is a battle, but he's living a life, and, you know, he's part of our, you know, something to just sort of let them know that it's not, that he didn't die, and it's another iteration of what it means to be human. And that's the thing too, because if you start thinking about mental illness, and then you start thinking about in the last 25 years, all the things that we never thought about before, like the different sexualities and modalities, like there's 100 things. I mean, I'm 65 years old, you know, 40 years ago, you know, it's like, yeah, they were gay and straight, you know, and all of a sudden now I learned there's like 100 different iterations of sexuality. There's all these different iterations of your mental health and all of that. You know, there's people with autistic or Asperger's or things like that. They're just different. You know what I mean? And so, okay, schizophrenia is more extreme and it can be awful, but it's just another iteration of human, and we just need to accommodate it, you know? And I think that that's a thing to say to people. Thank you for your sympathy, but, you know, we're all right and we love him and he's great, you know?
Thank you. Cheryl, did you have your hand up? Cheryl? No, you didn't. I thought I saw it.
But I will comment. Mimi, thank you. Number one, so much. I really think that you're bringing up and sharing with us what it was like for your daughters is so important. I experienced that as a sibling, and until this moment, until tonight, I've always felt terrible about my daughter who suffers several mental health challenges. I always felt horrible that she was an only child. But as of your conversation tonight, I feel better. I wanted to just tell you, the first time I went, maybe not the worst thing that ever happened, that she's an only child, because I was that sibling. And I think it's very important, very difficult not to let them be on the back burner. It's just one of the most difficult things a parent has to do. And I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you.
You know, I mean, siblings are profoundly affected by having a mentally ill sibling. They're so affected that as adults, they very often won't let themselves be hugely successful because they feel guilty. Who am I to have a PhD and be a full and do all these things, and my brother can't do any of that and is living in residential treatment? So siblings have a very hard time, even as adults, navigating self-esteem and feelings of worthwhileness and allowing themselves to be successful because they love
your survivor guilt, that too.
Yeah, they have survival guilt. Thank you, Miriam.
So true. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions? That was a wonderful talk. Kathy, you have to unmute yourself, Kathy.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how to do it.
You're unmuted.
At the bottom, there's a thing that says mute, unmute.
Yes.
Hear you, Kathy. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm unmuted. What a wonderful talk. What a wonderful talk. And Miriam, I'm a mom of 5, and 3 of ours have bipolar, one with schizoaffective, and I love your admiration for your son. I've always that's been the last years, about 5 years, I've just been conveying that of admiration, such admiration for our children who are suffering and still loving and kind and helping the siblings admire each other. I just think admiration is one of the sweetest gifts of life, and these are the bravest of the brave.
And you know what? I firmly believe that there is a depth, a layer to the love in our families that is also, aside from the embarrassment proofness, the layer, the richness of the love, because when something's good, when there's joy, it's so deep and it's so appreciated that in a way that's kind of a gift. I mean, you know, there are times when stuff will happen with Nick. We're in the process right now of switching him to clozapine. And it's pretty miraculous what's happening. And he's been very, you know, flattened affect for years and not connecting. The only time he comes alive is with his sisters. But the other day, you know, and when he would call me on the phone, he'll call me and he'll just I'll say hello and he'll wait a second and he'll just launch into what his latest campaign is for what he wants to get from me. And the other day he called me up and I said, yeah, Nick, because I'm like ready for like what the latest pitch is. And he goes, hi, Mom, how's your day going? And I almost dropped the phone. And you guys can relate to this because it was like, wow, he's outside of himself. He's connecting with the fact that I have a feeling, I have a day, I have experiences, and he cares about what they are. This is the first time, I mean, who would notice that? Nobody else but somebody dealing with this kind of mental illness would notice it. And I hung up the phone and I called my daughters and we're like bawling on the phone. I said, he asked me how my day was, but we understand how significant that is. And so those little victories are so sweet, you know? And I think that that's kind of a gift that this is, as horrible as in some ways, the love is so profound. The love is so unyielding. Because it has to be, because you're keeping them in this world. And you get to love on a different level than a lot of people. And you learn to love in a ferocious way that maybe other people don't, because you're keeping them in the world.
So true, so true. And the non-arrogance, that's the other thing. I just think the illness of our time is arrogance. And it is so beautiful to have a whole non-arrogant family.
Yeah, we're all just effed up. That's how
and
it
it's
is.
So beautiful. It's just so beautiful because there's no defending against it, because when you hear someone arrogant, you just feel like defending. And just when you have a whole group of children and husband and wife, everybody non-arrogant, it's very, very delightful.
Very interesting point. Yep.
So I have a question for you, Miriam, from one of our guests tonight. She said, I was wondering if you kept a journal all along. I read the book and I was amazed at how much you chronicled your journey. She says, I have a hard time remembering everything that's gone on in the last 5 years with my son's mental illness.
Well, this is what happened, is I waited, so started about 15 years ago, and I waited till almost 5 years ago to start writing. And what I had was, I'm not a journaler. I'm not a writer. I'm a painter. I've supported myself as a painter my entire life. But then the universe gave me a story that I just couldn't tell with paint. And so I decided I better write it. So I learned how to write. But I've lost what the question.
Did you journal? Journal?
So, thank you very much. My phone rang and it distracted me. No, so I'm not a journaler. So I sat down to write the book, and I had maybe 30, 40 pages, because now and then I would sit down late at night and, I'm going to write a journal over those first years. But mostly what that was, quite honestly, was drunken rambling, because it would sort of coincide with my red wine drinking. So I had about 30 to 40 pages of stuff written, and that was it. So I just sat down, and not knowing how to write, I just thought, okay, well, I better just write. So I started writing, and as I started writing, trying to remember things and writing, it's amazing, you guys. It's all up there in your head. I'm not known for a great memory at all. As I started writing, it starts coming back. It's like walls are breaking away and chipping down. And so I would have these avalanches of memories as I was writing about a different thing. So I'd quickly grab my Post-it and jot it down and put it up on the wall. And I didn't want to get distracted. But by the end of the first few weeks, my room looked like John Nash's workshop from A Beautiful Mind. Everywhere. But it just kept coming back. And then I would just go through all the papers and cull through them and organize them. And just through the process of 6-8 months, I would write every day, all day for 8 hours. It just all came back. And it was a real revelation. I realized, wow, I bet if I started writing about my childhood, which I had no memories of, that would start to come back. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Somebody asking here in the chat, it says, is Nick willing to take his meds? Now he is. We've been through all, for a few years, he wouldn't at all. Then I went through, every rule of parenting is thrown out the window. I paid him to take I gave him like $10 a day to take his meds. I did that for a while. I've been through all of it. But now he's compliant with his meds.
Miriam, we have a question or two questions from one of our guests. And she asks, she's curious how you got to feeling proud of Nick And the second question, she wonders if Nick has any insight or lack of insight regarding his schizophrenia.
In the last few years, he's gaining insight. I mean, it's real. I mean, it wasn't until quite recently that he wouldn't say the word, but now he talks about it, you know, and there's like little moments where I go, okay, a door just opened. And you have to listen carefully and learn to speak his language. I mean, when I felt the door first open was a while back. We were walking in town, and there was a guy who was either on drugs or psychotic, but he was standing in the street and screaming and really agitated and awful. And everybody was kind of like this, and we're walking down the street, and I said to Nick, I said, wow, what do you think's going on with that guy? Because I was interested to see what he would say. And he says to me, I think he's on SSI. Now, then I read what he's saying, and what he's saying is he knows he's on Social Security disability because he has schizophrenia. So he was saying to me, I think he has schizophrenia, but he wouldn't say the words. And I said, oh, yeah, probably either that or drugs or something. And then we walked a little more, and I thought, okay, I can push a little more. I said to him, were you ever like that, Nick? I tried to even ask because the guy was really anguished. And Nick said, no, not outside. And I said, oh, so you didn't want to do it in public where other people could see you, but you were like that alone sometimes? And he was really quiet and said softly, yeah, I was. And that was like this opening maybe a year ago. And this evolution has happened in the last year where now we talk about it. And see, I say to him all the time, look, Nick, it's not your fault you have schizophrenia, and it really sucks, but we have to deal with it. And so I talk about it all the time. And now finally, 15 years in, he's got insight and he talks about it. So it's pretty great to watch. And I guess that's the answer to the other question. Who wouldn't be proud of that? Look at him. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of, yeah, he is. It's just not what you thought, Mom. So he's not the famous artist, and he's not running a big corporation, and he doesn't have the life that, according to somebody else's standards, is this successful life. But he's having his life, and he's doing a damn good job of it. And I'm not comparing him to anyone else. You know, I'm just looking at him and seeing the courage that it takes to live his life. And I'm proud of him.
Yeah.
So lovely. You know, I'm just reminded of John Lewis, Good Trouble, Good Trouble.
Yes.
And we should name Miriam Feldman Good Spirit.
Yes.
Good Spirit.
Yeah.
That should be the moniker after your name, Miriam. Good Spirit.
Yes.
I try, you know, there was a point, all this is in the book if you read the book, but there was a point a few years in where everything got stable and he was okay, you know, everything was under control. And I was just dead. You know what I mean? It was like I was just dead inside. And I just thought, okay, everybody's okay. The girls are going to be okay. I'll just sort of maintain the circus and get through my life and then die. And then one day I just thought, no, I didn't go this far and this long to have ahedonia myself and have no joy and no pleasure in my life. And just because this thing happened to Nick doesn't mean we don't get to have joy, and it doesn't mean we don't get to make jokes, and it doesn't mean we don't get to be proud. And I just thought, screw it, I get to have fun. And I'm a good mom and I take care of him. I really do it, but I also have a lot of fun, and I make fun of stuff and I make light of it. And then there are times when, like I said, I howl at the moon. There are times, you know, I watched that movie, I Know This Much to Be True, that was on HBO.
Oh, that was
from
so
the Wally
painful.
Lamb. It was so powerful and so beautiful. And I mean, after we watched it, I mean, I had a night where I was just on the floor sobbing, you know, from the core of my being to where I thought I was going to die. Because also the actor, Mark Ruffalo, looks a lot like Nick. And oddly enough, his character of the schizophrenic brother, he had a lot of Nick's mannerisms. So it was really excruciating for my husband and me to watch. And when it was over, I was right back to that point where my heart had been ripped out of my body. But it's okay. So I cried. You know, my husband came by and he went to bed. And the next morning he said, I saw you in there. I felt like I should come comfort you. But then I thought maybe you just needed to have one of those good cries. I said, yeah, I just needed to. And then I'm fine the next day. So it's not that the pain and the grief isn't there, but it doesn't have to take over your whole life.
Thank you for that, Miriam. That was so well said.
Wow.
It's true about grief and sadness. We can grieve and cry all Saturday, and Sunday we're fine.
Yeah.
Sunday we're fine. We can focus on loss and devastation Saturday, and Sunday we're fine.
Yep.
It's amazing how the psyche works and the soul works. It's amazing. So any other thoughts, questions from anybody? It's been such an honor to have you.
It's been
Dick, and then you, Carla.
There's a couple of hands up too. I think middle seat gets both armrests, and Tim also has a question, and maybe Steph.
And Carta. So Dick, go ahead. Carter, I mean. Oh, Dick, you're muted. We can't hear you. You're muted. We can't hear you. You have to unmute. No, can't hear a word you're saying.
Sharon, are you talking to me?
No, I was talking to Dick Sussard, and then you, Carter, after. And then the two that Aaron had.
If you go to the bottom, you can just click on that mute thing.
Okay, Dick, what were you saying?
Did I unmute, or am I still muted?
No, you're talking. We can hear you now.
Hear you.
Oh, thank you. What a wonderful, refreshing, Mimi, presentation. So much inspiration, just unbelievable. And I wanted to ask the question, where is your son now? Where does he live now? Where does Nick live now?
Well, we left LA about 4 or 5 years ago, and we moved. We had some property up in Washington, and my husband had built a house to retire to here that I had no intention of ever doing. And then we did it. So we moved up here, and we moved Nick up here with us, and he lives in an apartment building it's like a HUD subsidized apartment building for senior citizens and people with disabilities. So there's a lot of just old people. There's a lot of old people with disabilities, and there's 3 or 4 or 5 people with mental health issues. And they have a guy that's there during the day just to take care of the building. So there's somebody there and around. So it's not, it's really an apartment. He really lives on his own, but it's got a little bit of supervision and help if you need it. And the big factor, the big element that's made all the difference is they know he's got schizophrenia. I don't have to tap dance around it. Sometimes he screams at night. Sometimes stuff happens, and they just deal with it. He's been evicted from so many places, and it's been so problematic. So that's so wonderful to just be able to be open and honest, because that was the one arena where I used to have to still kind of put up some kind of a fake front, because if you said, this is my son with schizophrenia, we want to rent an apartment, it'd be like, sayonara. So that's great. And then he also has, up here in Washington, we have a DHS funds for a caregiver. So he has this extraordinary woman who comes every day for about an hour and a half, make sure he has his meds and does all of that. So it's a good situation right now, but it has only been good like this maybe the last 2 years. It's been the housing thing, and that's something I talk about a lot, because that's a big problem.
That's kind of why I asked. I mean, as you well know, and everybody on this call knows, we don't have things like that down here in Los Angeles, and that's what we miss. And that was going to be the next part of my question is, how did you said early in your talk that you made a life for your son. So I'm interpreting that to say you kind of navigated the path and didn't rely a lot maybe on treatment programs or treatment centers. And what are some of the strategies that you used in growing him through the non-system in LA to get him to the point where 15 years later, he's now able to live by himself with, minimal oversight and monitoring? And do you have any?
I think, honestly, I can't take credit for that. I think it's just the course that his disease has taken and the medications being effective. He lives alone in his apartment, and things are quite good in the last year, but I mean, he lived alone in his apartment. His apartment was a nightmare, and he would sit inside alone all day long, and, you know, didn't have any kind of a life. And I constantly take him to every new group, every new thing, you know. And really the only thing that Nick responds well to is family. He likes when his sisters are around. His sisters are like the best elixir. My middle daughter Lucy's here visiting right now, and it's like he just comes alive when they're here. But but I never stop. You know, I take him to, at the mental health center here, they have an art group. So we go to the art group, and he won't go if I don't go with him. So we go in the art group, and he sits in the back of the room. And, you know, we're artists in my family. He sits in the back of the room in a chair behind me and doesn't do anything. I'm at the table with all the mentally ill people making a yarn sculpture. And he just sits there and he doesn't participate. I'm having fun building things out of like ice cream sticks and things like that. And he loves what I do and everything, but he does nothing. But at least he comes and he sits in a room with other people. So that's what I do, is I don't have the expectation that he's supposed to perform in any way. I'm just happy if, you know, when things were in that way, that he would just get out of the house and go somewhere. So I had no expectation from him. And, you know, my husband would say, it's so hard to take him to a restaurant, Mimi. We sat in the restaurant. He doesn't say a word the whole time. I have to handle the whole conversation. I'm like, so what? You talk. You got to, you know, you have a captive audience who's interested in what you have to say. So talk or don't talk. Sit in quiet. But for him to sit in a restaurant with his dad means everything to him. You can't expect him to engage in the way somebody else would. It means everything. So to me, I think the thing is to just give, and not expect anything back, not expect any reaction or response that's appropriate according to societal cues, because they don't function that way. I know it's important to him to sit in a restaurant with somebody, even if he doesn't say a word, even if he never makes eye contact. So I just keep bringing him places and plopping him down there. And it's kind of starting to, again, I don't know if it's just the trajectory of his illness, but it's changing.
Thank you.
Presence. Presence is the greatest. Presence is the greatest gift.
Yeah. Yes.
Just presence.
So we have a question here from Middle Seat, and we have a question from Karchar. So Middle Seat.
Hi, my name's Stephanie. That's my.
Sorry, I don't.
That's my. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, Middle Seat. I keep forgetting to change to my name on the phone. I'm a flight attendant. That's my public service announcement. So anyway, hi. I'm so glad that I came to this meeting, and it's really helped me a lot and inspired me and makes me feel hopeful more so. I have a daughter. She's 24, and she's been diagnosed with bipolar and psychosis, but I really believe she's schizophrenic. She just hasn't seen anybody. Mm-hmm. But I have no problem with stigma. I have no problem talking about her or people knowing. But since she doesn't know she has it, I'm wondering if you dealt with having to talk about your son or you know, talking to people about it, but people that would know him, and maybe it would get back to her that I'm telling people she's got schizophrenia and she doesn't know she has it.
Well,
so,
you know, that's a very tricky thing. And I don't even feel like I'm qualified to advise, but I would say it's like baby steps at a time. I mean, with Nick, even when he wouldn't talk about anything, I didn't like take a bat and beat him over the head with the fact that he has schizophrenia, but I would just say it, you know, but he had the diagnosis. But so say bipolar, because that's the diagnosis, and I would say to him, like I said, well, Nick, you know, because you have schizophrenia, you know, I wouldn't belabor it, but I just would get it into the atmosphere around him so that he would start to understand. But I mean, real insight is something that I think probably comes with treatment and medication, you know.
Yeah,
I would be careful, because you don't want other people to say, "Oh, your mom told me you have schizophrenia." Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, Stephanie.
Yeah,
I wouldn't tell anyone that your daughter has schizophrenia until there is such a diagnosis.
Okay. Yeah, she she was on medication, and she recently just took herself off of it, and the symptoms are back. And today was probably one of the most obvious days that they're back. And
you know, I would talk to her and say, you know, it's clear you're having mental health struggles. It's clear, you know, there's something going on here, and you have a diagnosis, and just sort of regard it that, because it doesn't really matter. Do you think the doctors know? You know, there's a diagnosis of criteria anyway. There's not a blood test for schizophrenia, so it doesn't matter what you name it. Just call it, you know, your condition, and do your best to help her.
Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you. Kartar, did you have a question?
I actually didn't have a question, but I'll take this opportunity to say to Mimi, thank you so much for your presentation. I've got maybe 2 or 3 more chapters to go in Robert Kolker's book, and then I'm going to start in on yours probably tomorrow.
If you go on YouTube, I did a panel with Bob.
Right, I saw that with Randy, and so that was inspiring also. And I reached out to you a couple months ago, and I didn't hear back because I'd like to, you know, talk to you about a few things, not, you know, part of this event. So
reach out because if I didn't, I've gone back to everybody. So if I didn't get back to you, that means I didn't see it. So reach out again.
Yeah, so I'll try to email you again. It's an email on your website. Is that what I did? Okay.
Website.
Okay, but thank you so much. Very inspiring.
Any other thoughts or things people want to share? Tim?
Yeah, hi Mimi. I'm sorry I didn't get to hear your whole talk. I was here for about the first 20 minutes, and I loved what I heard of your reading. And then when I was able to log back on, I was so touched by how you were defining success for your son, and how, you know, it's sort of a new measuring stick, and it just really touched me and made me feel grateful for him that he's got you as his mom. I am curious, and I'm not just asking this question because I work for NAMI, but I'm curious, and maybe you mentioned this, how much NAMI has been a part of your recovery or your son's recovery?
Well, you probably didn't hear, but I talked about the family to family and how that basically saved our lives. You know, I didn't know much about NAMI, and then somebody mentioned it to me, and I'm not a support group type person. And I was like, I don't want to go to a support group. And they're like, no, this is an educational seminar. And I thought, okay, that's something I could sink my teeth into. And I think the family to family is one of, if not the most important thing that NAMI does. And I talk about it everywhere I talk, at SARTA, at all the different, you know, book clubs, everything. I talk about that because I think it's the best thing. I mean, it gave me tools. It gave me understanding when I had no idea where to even start.
Well, of course, I totally agree. And has your son been able to check out a group or a peer class? Was that?
He didn't do great in the peer groups. And, you know, I hope I won't offend anybody by saying this, but my experience with Nick and with schizophrenia, you know, maybe not other diseases or, you know, mental illnesses, and maybe it's Nick, but my experience is Nick doesn't really benefit from sitting in a room full of people with serious mental illness. You know what I mean? Nick starts to thrive and bloom and elevate when he's with his sisters or when he's with other people, you know, and that's back to the thing I was talking about earlier about a place in the world for them. They don't, to have people with these diseases, you know, shoved away into prison or under a freeway overpass somewhere or hiding in their apartment. They need to be able to walk into a damn coffee shop or a party or something and be part of it. And that's why I take him places and do things. Just like the art group that we go to. I laugh because I tell my family I'm sitting in a room full of, you know, crazy people making art. It's like, it's kind of a hoot. And I also say crazy, and I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but I don't have time for walking on eggshells. And so I see Nick, he flourishes in those situations. And when he's in, like I had him in a group of young guys who were similar to him, much more functioning than him, all talking about their challenges with schizophrenia. And he just clammed up. You know, it just didn't do him any good. It's much better for him to sit in a room and talk about the latest Beck album with somebody. You know what I mean? I've seen him do better sitting in a waiting room where somebody says something about the cartoon character on his cap and he talks to some stranger about the cartoons he likes. It's like he doesn't benefit from that. I mean, I know lots of people do, but I just like to see him in the world.
Yeah, but you mentioned earlier that when you were having that conversation where you saw the guy who was struggling on the street and he had that insight that maybe he's on SSI, and it made me think like, well, there's some value to him being able to talk a little bit about that. But you know, listen, you've been paying close attention for 15 years, so I'm certainly not going to tell you. I know.
No, and I mean that's just Nick. I think I mean maybe lots of other kids.
Well, my son does not. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2.5 years ago, and support groups really don't work for him either, for pretty much the same reason you were mentioning for Nick. But he has really benefited from talking about his experience with students. So he got trained for ending the silence. So again, and I'm also saying this because like if there's any chance that you or Nick would be interested. Because we also have these great virtual programs where we have virtual meetings now, and
I'm totally interested in anything. Yeah. I'm all over the virtual.
All right. Stuff. Well, we will connect later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Family to family teachers, Miriam. So consider yourself signed up. So
so I'll tell you what happened with me with family to family is it saved my life. And these two women who taught mine were so great, and I made up. Then I was still, in the maelstrom. It was really just the very beginning. But I always said, when I get my footing, I'm going to train and I'm going to teach that. But my problem is I travel all the time, and so a couple times I was ready to do it, and then I realized I had to commit to these big blocks of time when I would be in one place to teach the thing. So that's what stopped me from doing it, but I'm open to it, and I'm not traveling as much.
Virtual classes, you just need your computer wherever you are.
Now that if we do it that way, I'm totally game for that.
Okay, all right, we will talk.
Okay.
Oh, any other last thoughts here? Kathy, last thoughts?
I just want to, Miriam, I think you were wonderful. You did a fantastic job. And I do always say, I think it's really important to not say crazy. Okay. I think it is vitally important because it actually hurts the people. It doesn't just hurt the parents, and there's some parents it doesn't hurt, but it's been one of the most hurtful things
really
to my children. And it is the most stigmatizing, and you're not at all intending to be stigmatizing, but it is, I always say, don't say it.
Okay. And I appreciate that, and I will never say
Thank you, and I think you were just awesome. I'm going to read your book cover to cover.
Great. Let me ask you something about it, because I want to understand. Do you not use the word crazy ever, or you just
Ever. I use it always I used it my whole childhood because my dad really was disturbed, but it is it has such condescension in it, and it has all of the connotation. It doesn't work. And you're not saying it in any condescending way. But that kind of vocabulary is not helpful.
Interesting, because I'll even say, I said to Nick today, come to think of it, we were talking and he said something, and I said, Nick, that's insane. And we just kept on talking, and my daughter looking like, Mom, and because it's like, to me, it's just all so, and I wasn't talking about mental illness, I was saying that's a crazy idea.
Yes, and I don't mean that you couldn't say that. I just mean, the other.
Point taken.
Thank you so much.
So I want to thank Miriam Feldman for enlightening our lives with her intelligence, her wit, her spirit, her honesty, her vulnerability. Miriam, you've been such a gift for all of us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So much. Thank you so very much.
I'm looking forward to this for a while.
Well, believe me, we were too. So thank you, and we know we're going to hook up in the future.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks again, Miriam. It was fantastic.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Great evening. Great evening.
Really terrific, everybody.